Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm thrilled to see you all here this morning. Welcome to Strategic Agility, the three keys to leading in a disruptive environment. We're happy to have you with us today. It's a great, beautiful, sunny Friday morning here in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, and I hope it's beautiful where you are as you're getting ready for a wonderful weekend ahead. As we're getting started today, I wanted to just welcome you to the webinar and ask you to say hello and type your name into the chat box. It gives me a great way as your host today to be connected to you and to know where you're connecting in from. So thank you so much for going to the chat and saying hello. Today's program is being brought to you by Bridge Innovate. Welcome to the Inspire series. We are a business innovation firm with Fortune 100 experience that teams with our clients to bring defining moments of change and design to enable growth and good in the marketplace. If we continue on, we wanted to just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we believe in. My name's Jenny Whitener. I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate and have had the pleasure of leading our organization for the past 18 years. My background comes from Ernst & Young Consulting, where I was a part of their innovation and growth capability for the firm worldwide. And it's been a pleasure to have my own boutique firm now for 18 years. And as we launch our work in the marketplace, we do that with great integrity, believing that our work with clients is built on partnership. And we also have some tenets that we believe in strongly around collective wisdom, human-centered design, the power of foresight, and of course, in all the work that we do, we always keep in mind our social responsibility with our work of innovation for good. So let's continue on. Today, I want to kind of set the stage around strategic agility by talking a little bit about COVID. When you think about the impact that COVID's had, the pandemic's had on us in the business world, or even with us personally, there've been a number of tragedies, and I hope for those of you participating today that has not been for you. But if you think about it in the other light, sort of what has been the positive? What have we learned from COVID? Think about the components of speed, adaptiveness, agility. Look at the innovation that's occurred very quickly in the marketplace with this pandemic, and look at the empathy that we have built among ourselves in communities and in our businesses, and understanding and caring for others. And you can see on the left-hand side of this slide some of the statistics. I mean, think about the fact that in the e-commerce world that we have progressed equivalent to 10 years and 2 months. Think about organizations like Best Buy, where they had worked for months to deliver curbside pickup, and they were able to deliver it in 2 days. Or think about the fact that, bottom line, US productivity has had the largest growth in 6 months that it's ever achieved since 1965. So there have been some positive outcomes with this tragedy that we are experiencing with the pandemic. Let's continue on. So what does that mean for us? We think about what's impacted our business environment. What does that mean for our organizations and the leadership approach that we need? I love this report from McKinsey and their report, The Next Normal Arrives. And you look at this quote where it says, what many leaders feared, and the pandemic confirms, is that their companies were organized for a world that is disappearing. An era of standardization and predictability that's being overwritten. And many are calling this age the fourth industrial revolution that's really being enabled digitally, the move to digital, the acceleration to digital, and that is really empowering organizations to look at things much differently. So let's continue on. What we're seeing in the new normal is that organizations are moving away from the standardization approach, and they're operating with a fixation on speed and simplicity. We also see that organizations are growing by scaling the ability to learn, to innovate, and to seek good ideas regardless of their origin. Many organizations are working hard to instill a growth mindset. They're approaching business with deep curiosity and an openness to experimentation and to failure. They're learning quickly. We've seen that in the pandemic. That's how they have achieved the speed to respond to the challenges before them, to try something, to learn from it, and then try again. Let's continue on. So, what is strategic agility? Right? So, how would you guys define it? Those of you participating on the webinar today, if you would use the chat box here on Zoom and tell me your definition for strategic agility. So I see Mary and Melissa and John and Bob. You guys join me today. I see a number of you participating. What is your definition of strategic agility? Great. Starting to see some comments coming in. Innovating at the time of disruption. Thanks. Really nice. What other comments do you have in terms of a definition of strategic agility? Fail quickly and move forward. Great, Marcy. I agree. What else? The ability to move and react quickly. Absolutely, John. So all of these concepts that you have coming in are right on point. The ability to adapt and to drive change. Let's move on to the next slide. I want to give you some additional perspective as you're thinking about strategic agility. When we think of that in terms of a definition, I think about the ability for organizations to see shifts. So how do we prepare for the shift, right? How do we see what's coming? How do we anticipate the trends? How do we anticipate the external disruptions that are occurring? And then how do we prepare and execute against that? So the ability for organization to see the shifts coming, and both inside the business as well as externally in the environment in which they operate, and to give them the competency to react, to change, to implement new ideas, and to act boldly. I mean, those are the kinds of definitions that I think of as well when we're thinking about strategic agility. So I see another definition coming in: innovating rapidly with everyone on the same page. The ability to adapt and drive change. Absolutely. It's what I wanted you to think about in terms of this definition of strategic agility, is to be thinking about it in the terms of how do you anticipate, how do you mind for these shifts and these disruptions that are occurring both in the business and externally. We have to have that mindset to see what's coming. And then we have to have the skills and abilities to analyze that, to determine those insights, and then to create the new and to experiment and to shape and iterate the new solutions, to be agile, to respond to these particular shifts. So let's keep going. So why do we need to think about strategic agility in our organizations, and what's the benefit of having a more robust approach for addressing and building strategic agility capability? The Human Capital Institute says it nicely here in terms of major outcomes. Leaders trained in agility are 24% more motivated to support new initiatives and 35% more likely to be entrepreneurial. So right there with you, they're aligned to you, they're supporting your growth and your innovation efforts along the way. People with high agility skills are 17% more likely to make high quality decisions in the face of uncertainty. So if we build that foundation of strategic agility, those leaders are going to be better prepared to respond and to lead in the faces of uncertainty. And that's what we need in today's marketplace. Let's keep going. So how do organizations build agility? I mean, when you think about it from an athlete standpoint, right, there are techniques, there are exercises, there are drills, there are many things that they do, from their diet, their regimen, to the exercises, the coaches that they put into place. When I talk to organizations and executives and CEOs that say, you know, Jenny, we need to be more agile, we've got to have more strategic agility, I'll say, well, what do you have in place to enable that? And they just kind of give me that look of, you know, looking into the lights and not really having a particular plan or a set program to support and to build that for their leaders. So let's think about the techniques to do that. Let's keep going. When I start to think about building strategic agility and strategic leadership capability, I'll always go first to the research. And I follow a lot of the work from the Center for Creative Leadership. I think they have an extraordinary research group and do great things in terms of looking at the major threads and theories around building great strategic leaders. And in their book, Becoming a Strategic Leader, the author brings forward this perspective. Individuals and teams enact strategic leadership when they think, act, and influence in ways that promote the sustainable competitive advantage of the organization. So, in order for you to be a strategically agile leader in terms of execution, we have to build first that strategic thinking perspective that would enable the agile response. And at the center, when they've looked at this research and the theory behind building this skill and competency with leaders, they've put together a number of different instruments. You'll see here an example of an evaluation instrument that helps you look at the types of skills and behaviors that you would need to have in place in order to exhibit that level of strategic thinking that's going to enable the strategic agility. So let's look at the next slide, which has kind of my favorites on the assessment. The first one is that leaders need to be able to scan the environment for forces and trends that could impact the organization. And this is where I was talking about that forward view. So we have to be able to analyze and scan these external forces and constantly be aware of them. The second component that they talk about in terms of strategic thinking is an individual, a leader, needs to move beyond their personal bias and see patterns and relationships between seemingly disparate data. So this is where we are talking about the creative process of looking at this data that's coming in from the scan and then looking for the patterns and the relationships that then enable me to do the third component, which is to offer up the original creative ideas. So do you see the basis here? Scanning the environment on an ongoing basis for these forces and trends, getting beyond my personal bias, getting outside my comfort zone, challenging myself to see these patterns and relationships, and then having a great process and technique for working with teams to create original and creative ideas to address them. That is the basis of strategic thinking that enables strategic agility. Okay, let's keep going. So when you think about that in terms of the traditional strategic thinking competencies, and you think about those in terms of the newer, sort of more agile approach to strategic thinking, think about the way these pair up. Look at the competencies on the left-hand side. On the traditional basis, you'll see things like compare, test, discuss, assess, define, analyze, very analytic. And look at the competencies that you see on the right-hand side that are around this strategic agility kind of focus. Reflect, create, visualize, brainstorm, imagine, synthesize, integrate. These are the competencies that we need to be building in our leaders to enable the strategic agility that we're looking for in the marketplace. Let's keep going. So today, what I'd like to share with you, my perspective on the 3 keys to strategic agility. When I think about that, they're very simple. One is that we have to have a robust, ongoing way to analyze business insights, both from the external perspective as well as the internal inside the business, the external forces of the marketplace, as well as the empathy-based perspective of our associates and suppliers and stakeholders. The second key to strategic agility, from my perspective, is around having robust tools for creative problem solving that are human-centered and that take into account all the best practice of rapid creation. And the third component is the ability to quickly and more effectively organize and implement change. So we can see things coming, we have the ability to create bold solutions, and then we have the ability to mobilize them in the organization through effective change. And those are what I consider to be the 3 keys to strategic agility. Now let's keep going, because I promised you guys today that joined for the webinar that not only would I talk about those 3 keys, but I want to talk to you about those in the context of a strategic agility leadership series that we have put together at Bridge Innovate for our clients. And you'll see that it's designed so that it covers these three components of strategic agility straightforward into 4 sessions that we do remotely using Zoom and a number of other technologies. The first one is focused on business insights. And in fact, the program that we are launching on February the 26th, that's the program that it starts with. And they're more or less designed to be lunchtime sessions where we come together, explore business insights, both the external macro trends, as well as giving you a chance as leaders to explore internal trends inside your organization. And we'll even give you an opportunity to do some empathy mapping. So you can try to pull those unique perspectives from key stakeholders and from the associates inside the organization that will give you that empathy-based perspective as well. The second component of the Strategic Agility Leadership Series is around creative problem solving. And we use a simulation experience called Experience Innovation Aware, that we'll be actually test driving later today. I think some of you might be joining us for that, where you're actually learning and applying the creative habits that are effective for creating bold solutions. So we'll be test driving that today. That's a 90-minute simulation. And when we go through that, you'll both learn those tools and then have a toolkit to immediately apply them in your organization. When we get into the designing change component of the leadership series on that particular program, we're looking at building not only the what to do, but how to be successful. So we want to engage stakeholders in that change plan, but we also want to align and engage the organization as well. So the human-centered component, as well as the tactical implementation of change as well. And we do that also through a simulation experience called Experience Change that we run with the teams virtually. And the final component of the series is a strategic agility capstone experience where you take all the tools that you've learned in the series and apply them to your own specific personal challenge in your business and pitch that back to the cohort. You can sign up for the series individually. So let's say you just want to do designing change, you're welcome to enroll there, or you can sign up for the full complete series. Let's continue on. Just to give you a bit more in-depth of each of those, and then we'll kind of open it up for some questions. On the business insights component, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that these are the components in that module that we cover. We talk about having great interviews in order to gather perspectives. So we help you design those and have robust tools for conducting empathy gathering and sort of ethnographical perspectives on gathering interview data. We give you the tools of empathy maps, and we practice using those in terms of pulling out the human-centered perspective to shape those business insights. We'll also look at external trend mapping using things like future wheels in order to explore those external trends and then to look at their implications for your business. All of those things take us into a business insights toolkit that we help you look at patterns and synthesize those patterns and create connections to form very bold insights. And all of that, and then we discuss how to apply that to our businesses. So that is the business insights learning activities that we go through in that module. On the next component is around creative problem solving. And in this arena, we look at the 5 habits of creative problem solving, from learning how to define open challenges, how might we challenges that give you open perspective and create new possibilities for solving historic problems. We look at the users from a human-centered design standpoint, and we explore the impact of considering the extreme user perspective. We take you through the process of ideation and brainstorming and selecting the best ideas from that, and then prototyping. So all of those things are covered in the creative problem solving module, including how to give effective feedback on a prototype. So those are all the things we cover on that particular component. When we think about the designing change module in this particular segment of the series, we cover on the next slide the components of how to engage people in change, getting at the emotional connection component. We go through a simulation experience to give the participants the opportunity to design robust change plans. You're given a goal to get 60% buy-in And yes, you have a budget, both in terms of time and dollars in order to work that change plan. So we'll have some very interactive simulation experience. So you'll get to practice creating that change implementation plan. And we use some tools like the opportunity threat matrix, the force field analysis, stakeholder mapping, all of those really great tools for helping you use every day and implementing change in your organization. So by the end of the program, you're ready to create and mobilize change plans in your organization. So let's keep going. The final component of the Strategic Agility series is our Capstone Event, in which you take all the tools that we've given you in the previous 3 modules and apply them to your own personal business challenge and come back and pitch that plan to the cohort. And this is where, I guess, collegial learning comes into play, or what you might consider peer learning. It's really working together as a leadership team to give each other feedback, to learn from each other, and to steer each other along the way. It's a really great experience. Okay, let's keep going. So this is the Strategic Agility Leadership Series. What I'd like to do is to invite you in the chat. If you have questions about strategic agility or about the series itself, to let me know what questions you have, or we can take you off of mute and let you just share that directly. So what questions do you have for me today? Okay. Good. I know that some of the organizations that we've worked with on this program so far have seen immediate application. We were working with a team at Unum to implement this program for a new set of leaders. And by the time we got to creative problem solving, they were already applying the tools within the business. So our goal in creating these types of programs for you is to build your internal capability, not only with knowledge and skill, but to give you the toolkits that you can immediately apply these tactics right inside the organization to start strategic agility immediately. So let's continue on. The truly resilient organization is one that has transformed, having built the attitudes, beliefs, and agility and structures into its DNA that enable it to not just recover to where it was, but to vault forward quickly. And that is my aspiration for all of you who are leading your organizations around the world, that you have this ability and the skills needed to catapult yourself forward out of this pandemic. So we have some questions coming in. It looks like, Bob, do you want to come off of mute? Luke, can you do that? Can you take our participants off of mute and see what questions we may have? How do you determine when a client is ready for strategic agility? Great question, Bob. What I typically think of is pain, right? So when an organization, when I typically am talking with a CEO, I want to know, like, how are they doing? You know, are things performing well? Are they hitting all of their targets? Are they on cruise control? If they're feeling disruption, if they are having any type of crisis in the organization, then they're ready to build more strategic muscle, more strategic agility muscle. And by and large, what we're seeing in the marketplace, and I'd be interested in your perspective as well, is that there's so much disruption. The pace of change is happening so quickly. It's not a question of whether they need strategic agility. It's how quickly can I build it with my leadership team? And I think that's what we're seeing primarily. So another question coming in, how are you linking strategic agility capability to the challenges with virtual work? Great question. So one of the things that we start with is that this program is completely delivered virtually using Zoom, remote simulations, whiteboards like Mural, and other tools. So we are practicing learning strategic agility with those tools, and then so that leaders can take those same agile digital approaches and implement them with their teams. Great question. So another one coming in. So what is your thinking on abandonment? I'm seeing a lot of leaders struggle to have the courage to abandon what we thought was the right strategy prior to the pandemic. John, this looks like a great conversation we should be having over a bottle of wine. So I do feel that, leaders, especially if they have a high degree of seniority, that many times they have almost sort of created a perspective that their own personal uh, reflection, their own personal achievement somehow is threatened if they abandon a strategy or a capability that they personally have helped to mobilize in the company. So it becomes a personal issue, not necessarily a rational or strategic sort of thought issue. And from that, what I would just advise you, if you're working with a leader like that, is to bring in the tactics of change, of personal change, and helping a leader reflect. First of all, I love the change style indicator. I don't know if you've ever used that psychometric instrument, but I love that instrument. And I'll use it with an executive to help them see where they are on the change scale. Are they a conserver? And so they really work with all their energy to conserve things the way they are. Or are they more on the originator side? So they're constantly looking for the new novel ways in which the business can grow and thrive. Where do they set on that? And it's not to say that one particular arena is right or wrong. I just want them to know where they are naturally with their orientation. The next thing I'll do is to ask them about the market. And I'll say to them on a scale of 1 to 10, where do they see the market changing? Is it kind of down here on the 1 to 2 range where there's not much change? It's pretty steady eddy. Things are just the way they are for the last 5 years, and they predict things will be that way in the coming 3 to 5 years. Or is the scale of change pretty high, 7, 8, 9, where their suppliers are now their competitors, or where the digital disruptions are changing the game in terms of how they're engaging with their customers? Where's the level of change? Then I come back to that leader and I say, now, how are you prepared? What has been your personal change style? Are you really open to embracing this originator viewpoint? So I try to address them and coach them by looking at it both in their personal orientation to change and then looking at it in the context of the market and asking them to step up that leadership. So a really long answer to your question, John, about how do you get them past and into embracing abandonment. But that's my best recommendation on the short webinar, but happy to engage with you by email or one-to-one on a Zoom meeting if you wanted to explore that further. Okay. Great questions. Thank you guys so much. Let's keep going. So as we wrap up today's webinar, I want to thank you for coming in and exploring strategic agility. What I would say is remember the 3 components, right? The business insights, scan external, scan internal, look at it from the macro trends in the market, as well as from the empathy, the human side. The second part of strategic agility, the creative problem solving, make sure your teams have rapid, proven tools to create unique, bold solutions to everyday problems. And the third component, make sure that they're all versed on how to mobilize change, both in terms of engaging people for the emotional buy-in, as well as the tactical organizational aspects of implementing a change. And then you'll have the right components of strategic agility for your organization. So I just invite you to join us on other webinars. We have some test drives coming up of creative problem solving next week. We also have a wonderful webinar coming up with Mary Axelson on coaching circles. And then, of course, our Foresight Scouts program. If you love futurists, if you want to be a futurist, if you are a futurist, you need to join Foresight Scouts. We've had a number of companies who are not only sending folks to that open enrollment program, but for example, Shaw Industries now is launching their own Foresight Scout team inside their company to stay abreast of these future trends. So happy to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us at Bridge Innovate, and we hope to see you again on another program very soon. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye now.